excited about Christmas?
Yes! I like your hat.
You do? Oh, thank you. I'm feeling Christmassy. Well, I am feeling Christmassy because today is December the 14th, and we only have 10 more days until Christmas. Well, Christmas Eve. And I'm so excited. So, today is December the 14th. So, right here, I'm going to pick up our number 14. So, this is our 14. And then what is on our block number 14? Look at it. You're supposed to show them, not you. There we go. What is that?
It's a lion.
It looks like a lion. There we go. Let's put our star on top of it. Oh, okay. So let's go over. Remember, we are working our way through our Advent blocks. So we're going to go all the way through. Are you going to point to them while we go through them? Well, remember, we're going to put our earth right here on top because that's how it all began. This is God's love story to his earth. So that's what we're talking about, right? To his world. How much God loves us and how much he loves his world. So let's go ahead. You can point to the first one. Talking about how it all began. And then how God starts over. You got to keep moving. God starts over. One at a time. All began. God starts over. God's pretty crazy promise. The people, the tears in the desert. And talking about the people that God picks. And the dreamer that saved the world. How God's people were free at last. We said a new home for God's people. And then a new king for God's people, remember? And then a king that had a heart after God, a heart like God. We're talking about God's golden house and the fire on the mountain and God's forever plan. Remember, this is Jeremiah. And now, today, we're going to talk about Into the Lion's Den. So let's see what we're going to be seeing in our stories today. Into the Lion's Den. Well, after Jeremiah's letter, which we talked about yesterday, God's people waited for God to keep his promise. Remember, they were living in a foreign land. They were waiting for God to come back. So, they were waiting for God to keep his promise. And they planted gardens like he told them to, and they built houses like they told them to, like God told them to, and they started families just like he told them to. Remember, he said it's going to be a minute. It's going to be a while. But I do have a plan. Most of all, God's people counted the years that they would be able to see what God was going to do. They remembered God's promise to bring them back home. So even though they felt alone, they knew that God was with them. Even when it was hard, even when they didn't listen, even when they were miles and miles from home, God did not forget his people. You think God forgot? No, of course not. You think God was just making them just, oh, well, whatever. You think that God... No, not at all. God had a purpose for this. So, he sent another prophet to remind them that he wouldn't stay away forever. And this prophet's name was Daniel. Have you ever heard of Daniel? I think I know what that lion has to do. Okay, let's see. Daniel was one of the smartest prophets who had ever lived. He was also one of the hardest workers. And he had a special skill. Like Joseph back in Egypt. Do you remember Joseph? God gave Daniel the gift to interpret dreams. So that was a winning combination. And it shouldn't surprise you that the king, his name was Darius, King Darius. You remember that, King Darius. But King Darius gave Daniel a great job and an important title. He gave Daniel a promotion because he worked really hard and he had the gift from God. Daniel might have been far from home, but the king had given him a lot of power. Who else does that remind you of? Remember? Joseph, right? Joseph was far from home, but he trusted God. God gave him the gift and gave him favor. And yes, and the king gave him a lot of power. Exactly. You know, I'm seeing that a lot of strength too. Well, you know what? That's kind of what happened with David also. Remember, David had, he was just a shepherd boy, right? But he trusted in God. He worked really hard, and God he didn't give him muscles. But God gave him a lot of power. He ended up making David king. Do you remember that? Okay, so let's see what happened with Daniel. Some people got jealous of Daniel really quickly. They wanted his great job and his important title. So they started plotting a way to take Daniel down. Yes. And this was their plan. Everyone knew that Daniel loved God and prayed to him every day. So they decided to get King Darius, do you remember? The king. They decided to get King Darius to make a new law that everyone could only pray, get this, to the king. Only pray to the king. But wait a minute. Daniel was one of God's chosen people. Daniel was a prophet, remember? So who did Daniel pray to?
God.
God, yes, not the king, but God. Well, they knew that Daniel loved God and prayed to him, so they were trying to trick him. Now, of course, you know it's a bad idea to pray to the king, right? But people should only pray to God. And Daniel knew that too. The king didn't know that. The king didn't know the one true God. And according to this new law, if the people didn't pray to the king, then they would be thrown into the lion's den and become a lion snack. What do you think the lions were going to do if they had a person thrown into their den?
Eat them.
Eat them. I think that's a pretty safe bet. They're going to eat them. So, this group of bad guys came to the king, and it was over in a heartbeat. The king heard their idea and loved how important it made him seem. He had no idea that they were trying to hurt Daniel, so he signed the paper, and just like that, Daniel's life was in danger. Do you think Daniel tried to hide once he heard about the new law? Let's see. Daniel heard about the new law, but he prayed to God anyway, just like he always had. He went to his room, he closed the door, and he prayed at the window just like he had every day. But this time, the bad guys were listening, and they knew Daniel had broken the law. They dragged him before the king, and they pointed to the law book, and they said, Daniel, you were not praying to the king, you were praying to your God, so now you have to go to the lion's den. That would be bad. I know. You're like, what big guys? That would be really bad. How do you think Daniel felt?
Bad.
Yeah. Do you think that he was like, oh, God, how come you're letting this happen to me? Don't you know you're supposed to... Do you think that's what Daniel was doing? I don't think so either. Remember, Daniel talked to God. He trusted God. So, the king, what was the king's name?
Darius.
Darius, good job. The king realized what had happened, and he regretted the law that he had made. But he was stuck. Once you made a law, you couldn't change it. So he had the soldiers throw Daniel into the lions. But even as he did, he said something that almost sounded like a prayer. Ready? He said, I hope your God rescues you. Do you think that King Darius was starting to believe that there was a one true God? Yeah. So the next morning, the king ran straight to the lion's den, and he peered his head in. He said, Daniel, are you in there? You think the lions went, nope, we ate him. He's in our belly. And that's what happened. No, it's not. The king heard back, yes, your majesty, I'm here. King, I'm here. Daniel answered the king. He said, you thought I was alone down here, but I wasn't. Along with these lions, God was with me. And even when it was dark, even when I felt alone, even when I was afraid, God was here and he protected me. See, Daniel wasn't the only one that God was using miles and miles and miles from home. He was also using the other prophets and other animals to get all kinds of people ready for his return. And still, every day Daniel prayed. Because of our sin, God seems far away. But even in Babylon, I will hope and pray. God, will you come back to stay? See, Daniel trusted God, and he remembered God's promise that he was coming back. He was making a way to come back, just like he did in the very beginning. So,